Another nuclear test. Each seems more powerful and deadly than the previous. The United States and former ally, the USSR, are in a relentless competition to build the most destructive weapon. For America, it is a battle of good versus evil. American classrooms teach students skills to withstand a nuclear attack. America is told to be aware of the dangers of communist agents working alongside good, patriotic citizens. In countless films, Americans are warned about the dangers of a communist takeover. They listen to it on the radio.
I'm no communist, tell you that right now.
And for the youngsters, comic books approved for their young minds. The American public is tuning in daily to see the televised hearings of Senator McCarthy, claiming the nation is under attack by the Soviet Union. American universities are targeted as hotbeds of communist sympathizers. The University of Illinois has not been spared.
And universities were extraordinarily powerful. Any place where there was a strong concentration of power in the country, the McCarthyites targeted.
It is late one Sunday evening in 1952. Joseph E. Ewers arrives at his office. Ewers is the director of the Office of Security for the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign campus. He needs to reply in the morning to University of Illinois President George Stoddard. Stoddard has been contacted by a state legislator questioning the patriotism of a professor who may have ties to the Communist Party. He teaches in the School of Music. His name is Norman Cazden.
My husband, Norman, had been a communist, and so had I. Does that make us evil people? No.
Norman Cazden felt it was the most effective organization for achieving the political goals that they sought.
Social justice, economic justice. The Communist Party in the United States was very active against discrimination against African Americans.
Joe Ewers was forwarded a report from a state official about Norman Cazden that detailed 13 connections between Cazden and potentially communist organizations, including the Daily Worker, which was the official communist newspaper in the U.S.
The most dangerous thing we did was we went up to Chicago and marched to try and save Julius and Ethel Rosenberg for being electrocuted, which they were.
Norman Cazden had been at the University of Illinois for 3 years. His musical credentials were outstanding. Undergrad at Juilliard, master's at New York City College, and a PhD from Harvard, where he studied with acclaimed composer Aaron Copland. A gifted composer with a range of musical talent, from classical to folk.
It was a happy time for that period in my life. I had 2 little kids, Betsy and Joanna. My husband, Norman, had a 3-year appointment at the University of Illinois and was led to believe that he would be recommended for tenure. But this was the time of the Cold War, and Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin, he had already done the Hollywood's blacklist. Now he was attacking universities. There was a lot of activity all around the state of Illinois against the local version of the House Un-American Committee, which was the Broyles bills.
Broyles was a state senator from Mount Vernon, and he was just trying to out McCarthy, Joe McCarthy.
The Broyles bills required faculty at the U of I to more explicitly say that they were not communist, and it also set out some grounds for dismissal of faculty.
I had good friends who were graduate students. They got a group of people together to go to Springfield to object to the Broyles Bill.
Illinois universities stood up against the Broyles Bill, and so there was more opposition.
I was a member of the local Champaign-Urbana committee of 5 women. Drove ourselves down to Springfield under the auspices of the League of Women Voters to sit through the hearings and then write a letter to the editor reporting on what we heard. I had the magical kind of belief if we were able to defeat the Broyles Bills, maybe Norman wouldn't lose his job. Of course he did. But I had that belief, which didn't work out.
People were fired as a result of a program that the FBI had invented. And this entailed having an FBI agent slip a college president a piece of paper with a list of that person's affiliations. Norman Cazden claims that he had been shown such a piece of paper.
He thought if he went quietly and didn't make a fuss, they wouldn't interfere with his getting future jobs. But of course, it wasn't the University of Illinois who interfered. It was right-wing groups who had a job of spreading that information to prevent people from one job loss to another and gained.
Courtney Cazden left Champaign-Urbana with her husband and their 2 children. She went on to obtain a PhD from Harvard in education, joined the Harvard faculty, and is now a professor of education emerita. She is one of the most respected authorities in the field of childhood education. In 2007, Courtney returned to Urbana to speak to the University of Illinois College of Education about her Cold War experiences and to thank the college for the support her family received from their faculty during this period in the life of her family. After leaving Illinois, Norman Cazden was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee. When questioned about his affiliation with the Communist Party, he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and refused to answer any questions. After 16 years of being blacklisted, Norman Cazden was hired by the University of Maine's music department. He remained there until he died in 1980. In 1978, retired University of Illinois English professor Charles Shattuck sat down with an Illinois history student
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
to discuss his experiences as co-chairman of the Student-Community Interracial Committee.
All right, we're ready.
Beginning in 1945.
So, you're interested in the Red Scare?
Right, especially how it relates to the interracial group that you were co-chairman of.
Made up of faculty, ministers, community members, and students, the group devised peaceful ways to protest racial discrimination in local establishments around the University of Illinois, including several restaurants and movie theaters.
It was always integrated, and it wasn't only, bleeding heart liberal white professors doing it. There was always this synergy that was happening.
Shattuck and his group organized protests, gathered petitions, and sent evidence to the state's attorney in order to pressure businesses to eliminate their racist policies.
In Champaign, things were still very segregated. We used to call Champaign Little Mississippi for a reason. Champaign-Urbana had all of the characteristics of a racist community that the rest of the country had.
Over time, and with the support of the university's administration, the group's hard work began to pay off. At least 5 restaurants put an end to their racist tendencies and allowed African Americans to be served without incident.
It was a different time, a different world. Unfortunately, it all came to an end in 1950, when we discovered the group had members of the Communist Party in our midst.
Unbeknownst to the public, the Communist Party had begun to infiltrate communities fighting for social justice. After several years, Shattuck was approached by two of the group's founding members, who revealed they were indeed communists, and that several others had joined their group to spread their own agendas. As radical members became more outspoken, the inner workings of the group began to disintegrate. Shattuck knew something had to be done.
Do you want to know how we stopped them?
At the meeting where they were going to disband the committee was evenly split between Shattuck and the communist sympathizers. So Shattuck brought in several other friends of his and used their extra votes to disband the committee.
Hi, Sally, how are you?
And to prevent the communists from calling in their friends to do the same thing, Shattuck's wife carried on a conversation with herself on the phone for half an hour.
Thinking about making a pot roast tonight. Got some meat in the freezer.
The committee officially disbanded in 1951. Their work would become a catalyst for other groups at Illinois, continuing the fight for racial equality.
Well, I was glad to be a part of the committee and proud of the work we were able to do. The fact is, we were founded by a pair of communists.
July 24th, 1953. Preparations are being made for a University of Illinois Board of Trustees meeting. 9 board members will be in attendance, including newly elected board member, Illinois football legend, Harold Red Grange.
Red Grange was proposed for the Board of Trustees on a platform that he would root out those wild-eyed socialists and pinkos.
Waiting patiently outside the meeting room, University of Illinois President George Stoddard takes one last look at his notes. On his agenda is a request for additional funding. One item not on his agenda, the board's plan to vote on his future at the University of Illinois. Stoddard will be the only person in the room surprised by this addition to the itinerary. Stoddard arrived at the university shortly after the end of World War II. It is an exciting time at the University of Illinois. The growth rate due to the returning World War II veterans has skyrocketed.
The veterans swarmed onto the campus. Before the war, the student population was about 10,000. And by the time I entered, it was about 20,000.
Whoever the trustees were at the time, they wanted to make this a great university. And they went and got George Stoddard. He was hired to raise the level of this university.
Stoddard liked to say that the U of I was a sleeping giant in need of arousal.
Stoddard recognized the opportunity presented by the increase in enrollment.
The modern major research university, like the University of Illinois, is really the creation of the Cold War. Millions and millions of dollars were poured into American research universities by the government.
Stoddard was the president of the University of the State of New York and a progressive educator. Sensing political opportunities, politicians across Illinois took advantage of Stoddard's liberal tendencies. The university's hometown legislator, Ora D. Dillevue, accused President Stoddard of knowingly harboring 50 Reds, Pinks, and Socialists.
Anita, get me yours, please. Thank you.
Stoddard instructed his head of security,
Yours? President Stoddard, yes, sir.
Joseph Ewers, to look into the matter.
Then we'll need to.
Ewers found the accusations false.
What do you have?
And said he could not find one example to support Dillevue's claim.
None. None. Let's send Mr. Dillevue a letter with 50 blank lines, and we'll ask him to fill in the names of the communists he's found on campus.
He was being cute. He should have been a little more diplomatic about his answer. Delaveau was just blowing wind when he said there were 50 communists. Why was he doing it? It was a part of the culture of the time.
After sending the letter to Representative Delaveau, Stoddard went on to explain.
Due to classified and top-secret research projects here at the University of Illinois, all staff members at the university have signed a standard loyalty oath.
Joseph Ewers, with a background in Army intelligence, was responsible for maintaining staff loyalty oath compliance.
People, I think, like myself, who took one of these loyalty oaths, was kind of embarrassed and never talked about it.
I taught for a year at the university, and I don't remember ever signing that oath.
I did sign it because I certainly was not a communist, but I did think that it impinged on the freedom of thought.
I knew about the loyalty oath, but it was not something that was ever raised. It just didn't get much attention.
The university was considered an easy target for politicians riding the coattails of anti-communism. The Illinois General Assembly released a report on the seditious activities occurring on campuses across Illinois, instigated by communist sympathizers. The University of Illinois was referenced throughout. And the constant accusations were taking a toll, keeping Joseph Ewers and his security department busy providing President Stoddard with facts to dispute the little McCarthys around the state.
Stoddard also certainly hadn't gone out of his way to make a lot of friends in the state legislature.
The hometown newspaper ran an editorial stating, "The University of Illinois does not need to emulate or become another Harvard."
George Stoddard could bring in good students, he could bring in other faculty, but that was part of his problem. He did bring in new people, and when you bring in new people, old people sometimes don't like it.
After 6 years, George Stoddard, unbeknown to him, attends his last trustee meeting. The presidential election of Dwight Eisenhower has signaled a shift in the nation's mood and a tolerance of new ideas. The inclusion of Red Grange has sealed the fate of Stoddard's tenure at the University of Illinois.
The News-Gazette, they said that Grange would be a good check on the leftist tendencies of the administration.
Upon entering the trustees meeting, Stoddard was informed that his position at the university would be put to a vote. And the board requested that he wait outside while the matter was discussed. After a vote of 6-3 to remove Stoddard as president of the University of Illinois, he was given stationery to write out his letter of resignation. Stoddard would go on to have a successful career in the New York State education system. His controversial departure would not soon be forgotten by Illinois faculty and students.
In Hollywood, there was a secretive government film studio that was shooting more film per year than virtually any other Hollywood studio, and nobody knows about it.
Lookout Mountain Laboratory was the film studio that the U.S. government relied on for documenting all the atomic and nuclear tests with America's rise to power in the Cold War.
In 2009, 2 University of Illinois professors came across a most unusual story. A story that had all the plot components Americans love: power, danger, celebrity, patriotism, along with some Hollywood glamour.
When I tell folks about Lookout Mountain for the first time, the one story that I often like to lead with is they called on Marilyn Monroe when they were facing a particular problem, which is that at these huge Pacific nuclear tests that took thousands and thousands of people, too many of the workers there were writing home and telling folks about what they were doing. Secrecy was a problem. And so we see a few of these in which Marilyn Monroe, she looks right into the camera. Her line that she says over and over again is, "I hate a careless man."
Lookout Mountain was funded by the Department of Defense through Congress. It was secret. It was a secretive facility, and they were doing top secret work.
Lookout Mountain drew from Hollywood talent. It needed that talent who could help dramatize the story appropriately.
Lookout Mountain was featuring the technical side because they wanted to reassure their audiences that everything was under control.
It lent just the right amount of drama while also making everything seem very normal and routine.
I wonder if you'd mind speaking right to our camera. Not at all.
Here are nuclear weapons. They are these incredibly destructive things. However, don't be alarmed. At the same time, you need to know what kind of damage they could do to us if we were ever subjected to them, and be prepared for it.
Operation Alert, a realistic rehearsal for an atomic attack, was the biggest nationwide air raid drill ever attempted.
This was an operation about reorganizing our senses.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing.
Lookout Mountain, the people there didn't think of their work as propagandistic, but it was certainly persuasive.
Teaching people to see things a certain way that they'd never seen before. Ned and I didn't know it was going to take 10 years to tell this story. But once we realized that nobody had told this story and how significant Lookout Mountain's work was to this nation's history, we just knew we had to follow it till we got it done. People are surprised when they learn just how many detonations happened.
And most of those tests have happened on the continental United States.
Survival Town Atom Test measured a model village in the Nevada desert against the awesome power of nuclear energy.
We are the most bombed country in the world. The legacies of nuclear testing are going to be much longer lasting than any of us or any of the civilizations we look around and conceive.
Although several decades have passed, the shadow of the Cold War still looms over many communities today. The exhibit, Hotspots, Radioactivity and the Landscape, at the Krannert Art Museum is educating a whole new generation on the enduring legacy of the nuclear age.
This is a cozy that was made for a Nike Hercules nuclear warhead. You don't necessarily know what it is when you see it after it's been stuffed. Art, it lets you say things that can't be simply stated. I can make a work of art that is simultaneously beautiful and ugly at the same moment. I had this memory. I remember people being very worried about a nuclear war. I remember that.
The most common reaction that I noticed to this exhibit was one of everyone being able to connect one of the works to a personal story.
Looking at what the legacy of the Cold War has left us with. Some of those nuclear technologies are not secured, so we're running around, we're fighting wars, but we're not dealing with the aftermath, and the aftermath could be devastating as well. We have to be responsible for the damage that we've done